people still joining the chat or the panel?
Yes, so participants have started joining and you're welcome to start when you're ready.
It sounds good. Thank you so much for joining us today in today's Hispanic Heritage Month panel discussion. This discussion is hosted by the AIAA Diversity Working Group, and it seeks to highlight a few engineers of Hispanic heritage who are doing amazing things in aerospace, such as these incredible people that you will hear today that I am excited to hear about too. My name is Ricardo Crescencio. I am a Mexican-American recent graduate from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, with a bachelor's in aerospace engineering. So yeah, that's just a little bit about myself. I'll be today's moderator. Um, but we'll get started asking these amazing people some questions. So yeah, we'll let them introduce themselves first, starting with Catalina. And I just do want to remind everyone that we will be having a short Q&A at the end, and there is a Q&A section where you can put in questions, and we'll do that at the end. So, Catalina, if you want to get us started.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Catalina Caslon. I'm a Chilean American aerospace engineer at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works in Marietta, Georgia. I am currently part of the Lockheed Martin Engineering Leadership Development Program, doing my first rotation in structural design. I recently graduated from Virginia Tech in May of 2022 with my bachelor's in aerospace. And since then, I've been heavily involved in the AIAA bridging young professionals at Lockheed Martin and the professional organization. I've also been a part of multiple high school and college internship program mentorships.
Randy, if you want to go.
Hi, I'm Randy Herrera, and Mexican American. My family is from northern Mexico, from Coahuila and Zacatecas. I was born and raised in San Antonio. I went to school at Texas A&M University for my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering, and my graduate degree comes from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York, also electrical engineering. I've been in the laboratory for over 36 years. I've had a number of jobs. I started off doing radio science operations for both the Galileo and Cassini missions. And from there, I was a group supervisor. I was part of many section management teams for about 15 years doing management sort of stuff. I was also the lead systems engineer for Cold Atom Laboratory and for the Deep Space Atomic Clock. In my current role, I oversee the Engineering Technical Authority activities at JPL on behalf of the chief engineer here at the laboratory. One of my fondest memories is searching for gravitational radiation. And someday when I have more time, I'll tell you all about that exciting search. So take it over. Back to you, Ricardo.
That's awesome. Carlos?
Hola. Good morning, everybody. I am Lieutenant Colonel Carlos Pinedo. I'm from Torreon, Coahuila, Mexico. So immigrant, grew up in LA, got my bachelor's and master's in aerospace engineering out of MIT. I have a PhD in bioastronautics from CU Boulder. I'm wearing this fancy suit because I'm in the Air Force, formerly combat pilot, currently a test pilot. I was just prior to my current post, I was the dean of the Air Force Test Pilot School at Edwards, in charge of our space flight and enlisted test programs. And now I'm the senior project pilot on the new B-21 Raider over at Edwards. So happy to see you guys. Huge proponent of outreach. I'm an aviation inspiration mentor for the Air Force, Z-Factor Fellow, and have been on various AIAA panels, most recently the Diversity Working Group as well. So happy to be here. Over to you, Ricardo.
Awesome. We'll start off with our first question. How do you think your heritage/background influence your choice in career and your success in your profession? Randy, if you want to get us started with that.
Well, sure. Sort of in an odd way. I grew up in San Antonio, on the west side of San Antonio. It was a predominantly Mexican-American community. It was pretty isolated, self-contained. Thinking about this now is back when I was 8 or 10 years old, I always thought it was kind of odd where I realized that there were people who weren't Mexican and they didn't eat tamales at Christmas, and I was just like, oh, pobrecitos, poor things. It just, you know, at that point, it didn't click that people had different backgrounds than me. I was 8 years old. My parents also supported a lawsuit against the state of Texas because of inequitable funding, public funding of schools. So education was very important in my family. When my younger brother started first grade, my mom decided to go back to school, get her degree. My dad was not happy at first. But the result of all that was that I never had anyone tell me there were things I could not do. In fact, the opposite. I had wanted to be a math teacher, I thought. I did. And my dad kind of pointed out, you know, son, teaching math is more about the teaching part and less about the math part. He knew that I really loved math. And I did. I just was my favorite subject. So he was sort of an engineer. He was a DOD civil servant working at the largest air base at the time, Kelly Air Force Base, maintenance Air Force Base. And the Air Force sent him to school to learn about time and motion studies. So he helped to plan the disassembly and reassembly of C-5s, their engines. So he came in contact with other college-educated engineers. And because of that, he saw what they did, and he felt that I could do that too. So it was because I was sort of isolated that no one ever told me I couldn't do these things. And at that time, you know, we only had 3 stations, 3 television stations, 4 if you had the right antenna to get PBS, but nobody watched PBS at that time. So it was sort of in an odd way, a blessing to grow up in sort of this very Mexican neighborhood.
Nice. Would any other panelists like to answer that question? How do you think your heritage/background influenced your choice in career and your success in your professionalism? Carlos, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up with my dad saying one very common phrase. My sister has it tattooed on her wrist, and it's "échale ganas," right? So, which loosely is, you know, give it your all, right? Ironically, one of the core values of the Air Force is excellence in all we do, right? And so, but échale ganas is, it's more, right? Like, you got to go hard if you want to achieve your dreams. And so that was always the last thing my dad would say before heading back to college. Like, you know, usually something along, you know, go with God, échale ganas, right? Like, and kind of the same vein of Randy, right, is effectively growing up, somebody told me that I could change the world, and I believed them, right? Because nobody told me that I could. And so, and growing up in Hispanic, like I said, I'm an immigrant from Mexico. We grew up in LA. LA is very Hispanic, right? So it's a very easy transition. Most of my family here, even after 30 years, still only speak Spanish, right? And so very family oriented, very support oriented. So that Hispanic culture, that focus on familia, the support, and part of choosing what I want to do in my profession and becoming a pilot. Nobody knew how to do that. There's no pilots in my family. There's nobody in the military, at least not in the U.S. military, because we're all Mexican. And so, but nobody knew that we couldn't do it, right? And growing up in LA, cars are everything, right? Like, you want to have a cool car, you want to have a fast car. You know what's better than a cool fast car? A cool fast airplane, right? So big motors, going quick. So I grew up with that kind of motorhead mentality, working on cars. A lot of my family members are mechanics. And so that's what got me interested in engineering as well. Growing up in Palmdale, and the AV, for those familiar, that is aerospace mecca. So I grew up with the SR-71 flying overhead, B-2 flying overhead. And I was like, well, that looks awesome. Let me go do that. So that's a little bit of how I got interested in becoming a pilot and join the Air Force.
That's really cool. Échale ganas. I like that. I get told that all the time. Thank you, Randy and Carlos, for sharing. We'll move on to our next question. Were there any unique challenges where you encountered as a Latina getting into aerospace or engineering, either from your community or the aerospace industry? So Catalina, as our only Latina here right now, you want to
Yeah,
give us a go at that?
yeah, of course. So as a Latina growing up, I faced a couple unique challenges um, from my upbringing. Both of my parents are Chilean immigrants, and they did not have the opportunity to get a college education. So my dad is a truck driver, and my mom is a monitor tech at a hospital. Um, while saying that, my career path and navigating that was the hardest part for me. It was there was a lot of uncertainty around it just because um, there weren't a lot of people around me that were doing it. Um, so that brought a lot of uncertainty on my end. I was fortunate enough to I have an older sister who actually um, is an aerospace engineer, and she was my my one of my biggest resources when it came to trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a what I wanted to do with my career. Um, the only issue is she is 10 years older than me. So from the time I was born and by the time she was well, by the time I was in third grade, she was already going into college. And it was a big gap where that generational gap sometimes created some challenges for me to kind of find those resources, apply for internships, and just feel confident in the space I belong in. Um, on a more industry level, I will say that as a woman and as a Latina in the industry, um, it is hard balancing my position in a company and also just as a female in a male dominant industry. And for many of us, and myself included, there is a unspoken pressure to prove that you can excel in a field where representation is still growing.
Nice. Thank you. Um, we'll move on to our next question. Who are some of the role models slash mentors that y'all may have? Randy, if you want to get us started.
Sure. So first of all, my dad and my mom. My dad didn't have a formal college education, but he was a smart guy. I think I even still have some of his mannerisms. When I'm thinking about something, he used to do this thing with his mouth. And so, we would go on trips from San Antonio down to Corpus Christi a couple of times in the summer. And he would have everybody pull their luggage outside, just put it outside by the truck. He had a pickup truck with a shell on it. And he would look at it, and then in his mind, he would stack it all. And then he would start to put it in, and it always fit. So he had this geometric intelligence, and he would just be able to figure out problems by thinking about it. And I think if I'm a successful engineer right now, some people may argue with that, then it's because of my dad. It's because he was always like, what's the plan? Even my siblings are that way. It's like, okay, what's the plan? So I have to say that my dad is probably my biggest role model. My mom also, because she was always like very up on education. And she and my dad, like I said before, participated in a lawsuit against the state of Texas to make sure that all schools were funded equitably. So, those are the two people that I look at that, I think I kind of lucked out when it comes to parents. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I love my parents too. Um, Catalina, do you have any role models or mentors?
Yeah, I can actually second that for you and Randy. My parents were some of the biggest role models I had throughout my career, throughout my life. Um, I actually uh, experienced some type of challenges when I was actually going into schools in the small town that I am from in New Jersey. The first language I started learning was Spanish. And then when I entered school, they quickly put me into ESL because I couldn't speak English. But I did know how to speak English because my sister was in school and she was teaching me while I was um, while I was actually going into school. But my parents fought really hard with the school and they were constantly arguing with my teachers, trying to get me out of basic skills and ESL classes. And even from that young age, I just saw how dedicated they were to make sure that I could be successful in my education. And that kind of translated and stayed with me throughout my college, my schooling, and my professional life. So their hard work and dedication is something that I inspire to be because they have gone through so many hardships that I want to make their lives easier now that I'm in a position that I can give them those opportunities. And from there on, I also have my sister who is that role model who accomplished everything that she set out to do. She showed me that I can be an independent woman in a male dominant industry, and I could also do anything that I set my mind out to do because, you know, we can do it and there is nothing stopping us from doing it, even if we come from, places that you don't have, might not have all those opportunities set in stone already.
Yeah, Ricardo, if I
Great.
could jump in as well. To echo Randy and Catalina, so I have 2 rings. Might be hard to see the one in the pinky ring. That is my dad's college ring from Universidad de Juárez Durango. He's an agriculture engineer. The one next to it is my MIT ring. And so I would echo that, my father in this case, right? So that's not a US accredited school that he went to, right? So he immigrated to the United States, 3 kids, married. And although he's an agriculture engineer, cannot practice agriculture engineering unless he goes back to school. That's not what he did, right? He got 3 kids, he got to take care of the family. So he ended up becoming a mailman. He was actually our own mailman, which also meant that your report cards, he already saw them hours before you're ever going to see them, right? So you definitely have to echale ganas in school. But, we came to the United States in very classic sense, right? For more opportunity. And we joke a little bit. Growing up, it always felt like my dad gave up on his dreams a little bit to give us ours. But that's not quite it, right? I would say as I've grown older, he gifted us his dream, right? So there's 5 of us now, all college educated, all have done really well here in the United States. And so huge mentor. So that's a big one to echo the family aspect of it. The other big one for me was, and I think an important piece of having these kinds of panels is that growing up, I was telling everybody, I'd seen the space shuttle. Endeavor was built in Palmdale. I was 9 years old. I was like, that thing is awesome. I'm going to go fly that. So who was to fly that? Astronauts. So where do astronauts, go look at their backgrounds. I went to the library. There was an astronaut almanac. I was just looking at their bios. They're test pilots, and a lot of them go to MIT. And I was like, well, okay. I'm like 9 years old, 10 years old. I'm like, I'm going to be a test pilot and go to MIT. No idea if that's a hard thing to do, easy thing to do. Little kids run around wanting to be space cowboys. Just a lot of bravado, right? And so, but to me, fun dream to have when you're little, right? And dreams change. But in high school, I met one of my current even mentors, Major Conrad Hernandez, half Honduran, half Mexican, F4 pilot, right? And that little bit of exposure to somebody who's actually living the thing that I've been dreaming of doing made it a little bit real. And then that's all I needed. I needed this abstract, crazy dream to be like, oh, wait, this is actually possible. Somebody is actually who looks like me, right? And he's more white presenting as well, sounds like me, grew up culturally similar, has done the thing that I want to do. And this is actually a possibility for myself. So, so those are 2 key mentors for myself. Again, my parents, and then Major Hernandez.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll move on to our next question. What were some obstacles that you encountered in pursuit of your career? Carlos, we'll just start with you because you just answered and we'll just get that going still.
Yeah, no, I'll talk to two obstacles. I think one that maybe a lot of those on the panel may be able to relate to. Anybody who's gone on to live somewhere that is culturally different than themselves. Like I said, immigrant, Mexican, grew up in LA. LA is very Mexican, right? It's the dominant culture here. So language is not an issue, music is not an issue. Um, uh, when I went to MIT, for those familiar with Boston, that is not the case, right? It's freezing. I thought I was going to die that first winter. Um, and it actually, it for me is a real struggle, right? In college, engineering is hard. No matter where you go, engineering is hard. It's not an easy field to get into. Then you add that extra component of, hey, now I have none of the cultural support. Like nobody around me looks like me. I know I'm starting to enter this space of like one of one, right? You're the only person in any room, your background, and there's nowhere to go to get that support, right? Both at school and outside of school, at least initially. So food's different, music's different. And to me, I really debated my junior year at MIT, transferring back to California to finish my degree here. Because missing home was more than just missing family. It was missing la cultura, right? And I realized that was a big part of who I am and what I needed. And one big way that I overcame that a little bit when I was I stayed at MIT and graduated, stayed on for an extra year to get the master's, was I started tutoring in JP. JP is a very Dominican population, right? So in lieu of trying to find the Mexicans in Boston, which there are very few of, I was like, well, let me take this opportunity to learn about other Latin cultures, right? And although there are big differences, right, we're not all the same, or we're actually quite different. The diaspora of Latin America is quite diverse. But being able to mentor kids and help them out and get, my cultural support that way was really, really big for me. And then the second big obstacle is, being an immigrant in the U.S. military. Immigrant's a big political topic, right? It can be very challenging at times. And people around me, sometimes out of ignorance, I've heard and been called like, oh, they may be saying some inappropriate things about immigrants and maybe using some language that is offensive about immigrants. And then they remember that I'm an immigrant and they're like, oh, but you're one of the good ones, to imply as if there are other bad ones, right? And I have family who's undocumented, who's come over. I have dreamers that are part of my cousins who are still struggling to get papers so they can stay in school. And so, finding myself in those kinds of places and learning to engage people in a positive way. I find that most often than not, they're not actually saying it out of malice. It's, usually out of ignorance. But, it is a tough thing to have to, even while you're in a combat zone, even while you're wearing a uniform, even while you're putting your life on the line for the U.S., to still have to defend how American you are, right? And so that has always been an interesting challenge for me in the U.S. military. And so I continue to try to support all those who've chosen to wear the uniform independent of where they came from.
Thank you for sharing that, Carlos. There's quite some obstacles, especially like you said, being in the Air Force. I'm sure I can't imagine what that's like. But Randy, if you want to add on to any obstacles that you may have encountered.
So I think in general, for our communities, they're going to be on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. And I think I've been very lucky. In Texas, in San Antonio, in Bexar County, at the time when I was in high school, there was a clearinghouse for scholarships. And you could apply that you could go to this, and it was a booklet they would send you, or your counselor would have. And I was able to apply for a scholarship called the Caffarelli Scholarship. It was a gentleman who had no kids. He made a fortune in the grocery business in San Antonio, and then he put it in a bank and told the bank, create a trust fund and support these high schools over on the west side. And so that paid for the majority of my undergraduate education. So I was very lucky to get one of those scholarships. And now I'm going to do a little bit of a plug for graduate work. There's an organization called GEM, G-E-M. Everybody write this down. And it provides financial resources for people who are African American, American Indian, Hispanics, to go to grad school in either science or engineering. And that paid for the majority of my, in fact, it paid for all of my graduate work at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Also provided a summer job, summer internship. So I've been very lucky, and I've been able to take advantage of this, of those opportunities that came my way. And I guess one thing I would add to that is people say, well, how can I succeed? And the best way to succeed is be ready for those opportunities that come to you. As an example, when I was maybe 2 years into my stint at the laboratory, I was in a group called Radio Science, and the person who was sort of the lead for this type of science on the Project Galileo left the laboratory, and the supervisor was looking for someone thinking about how to replace them. And she said, well, does anybody want to just kind of take their place temporarily and just take notes? And so I was like, well, I can take notes, you know. And so I started going to meetings, and within a month or so, the rest of that Galileo team was coming to me, asking me questions about the science we were doing. And they started to look at me as the lead. And it was all because, and I ended up being, I think, very successful in that role. It's because I took the sort of opportunity to just say, hey, yeah, I can do that. So be on the lookout for those opportunities to step up and just do something different. Don't be afraid to fail.
Thank you, Randy. Catalina, any obstacles you've encountered in pursuit of your career?
Well, some of the obstacles have encountered in my career has actually been more internal. It's been more of feeling of imposter syndrome. Being a first generation engineer in my family, and accomplishing the things that I've worked on. Sometimes that feeling, and sometimes I don't celebrate myself because I don't think that I'm doing everything that I can be doing. And through different experience and, you know, putting myself out there and getting myself out of my comfort zone, I've actually been able to really, start believing in myself and my own potential. And by that, as soon as I start believing in myself, I'm able to, radiate that to other people interested in the industry. I'm a really big advocate for mentorships, and I think that one of the main reasons why I am doing what I'm doing is to make sure that the future generations of STEM really have the ability to be exposed to these things, to be exposed to AIAA panels, or to be able to go into their classrooms one day and see an industry engineer standing up there ready to give them a presentation and show them some small segment of what we are doing on a day-to-day. And I think that all the feelings of imposter syndrome, as soon as I'm in front of individuals that can benefit from what I'm teaching them and learn from my experience, it all just goes away. And I just am able to, give them something that they didn't know before entering the room with me. So
Awesome. I'm glad you said internal obstacles. I'm pretty sure we can all relate to that. Knowing what you know now, what could you tell the younger self, a younger you? Carlos?
Yeah, I think for sure, I would echo my dad's mantra of echale ganas, but I think to tell my younger self to kind of address that internal obstacle that Catalina is talking about is you are as good as you thought you'd be, right? That you could ever be, right? And so I think in that same vein of like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to step up to the plate, if I could overcome these challenges of what I wanted to do in life. And so kind of that same mantra of, yes, you are good enough. And yes, you are deserving of being in the spaces that you wish to be in.
Catalina.
Yeah, Carlos, you held the net on what's the saying? The nail on the head? That, yeah, there you go. I would voice also just trusting the process. Being in schooling is hard. Everyone here that went to school, they know that they have had hard classes, they've worked long hours to do homeworks, and you're facing challenges every day that you're going into a classroom or into a workspace. Know that even things are overwhelming, every step is going to be part of your journey, and it's going to get you to where you want to be. That is something that has resonated with me. And I look back at the times where I was in classes and I was just like, I don't think I could do it. I think I need to move back home. I think I need to just, change my major and pick something that I think is easier. But just trust the process.
So I'll add on to that. So I think about maybe 4 years into living in California, working for JPL, I seriously considered going back to school to getting a degree in literature, because I was like, this engineering thing, I'm not quite sure, but I just stuck it out. So things I would tell my younger self, I mentioned one earlier: don't be afraid to fail. Take that step out, that walk the plank, and have trust that you've made a good choice. Actually, another one is, sometimes you have to trust the people that hired you, that they made the right decision. And when you have those sort of moments of doubt, you got to think, well, somebody thought I could do this, so maybe I can. So keep that in mind. I would say speak up even when you're not sure, because it's just, we all have that self-doubt. And sometimes it's that one little voice that makes the difference. If you've ever seen Horton Hears a Who, at the very end, there's that little kid who's like, they're trying, everybody, say we're here. And the professor picks up this tiny baby and he lets out a yop, 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 yop. And it goes out, and that's what did it. So don't be afraid to speak up. I think the other thing to remember is that you're working with people. Engineers are, we don't take a lot of humanities classes. And I think we need to remember that we're working with people that have their own families, their own histories, and we can do great things together as a team. But we all have to treat each other as team members.
Awesome.
Yeah, Randy, I would echo that too. The idea that failure is not an option, right? Very classic NASA phrase. And I would say that is not true. Failure is definitely an option, right? All failure is learning. And I think for me, a major obstacle to overcome at a young age, after getting a series of academic successes early on in elementary school, high school things start to get harder, college things start to get harder, and now you're actually starting to fail at things. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? And I found that, at least for me, a mantra that I like about success is, I have found that success is a combination of your attitude, your aptitude, and opportunity, right? And so, the attitude you take around failure, or what happens with failure, the opportunity to put yourself in a place where you might actually fail and go, it's okay, right? What did I learn from it? How do I get better and move forward? I think that's always a struggle with anybody. And I think particularly in, you're talking about Hispanic Heritage Month that we're celebrating. When your family depends on your income, right? And that job is critical for both yourself and others. Failure gets a little bit more difficult. So how do you give yourself opportunities to do that? When you're the only person in your family to have gone to college, that failure stings a little bit more, right? If you don't continue and finish, right? And so I think for many members, possibly those in the audience, it can be very challenging to put yourself in a place whether it's a mental mindset into a physical place where you allow yourself to fail and learn because of all the other demands and pressures that are on many Hispanics or Latinos who are going through engineering, aerospace, and trying to succeed in this field. And so I think that's why I think it's critical for those of us to give those around us those opportunities to fail and succeed, right? And so whether it's through scholarships, educational opportunities, gap years if you need one, right, for your own mental health or work or go travel. So I think those are very important for us to do.
Thank
Yeah,
you all
just to
for
add
sharing.
on, just to add on to what Carlos said, JPL knows failures, and they sting really hard. I recall at the end of 1999, I believe, and we had, maybe it was 2000, JPL had 2 failures, like within months of each other, arriving at Mars. And boy, talk about low morale. But I remember our director at the time, Ed Stone, had an all hands, and he said that what our job was at JPL was to build robust systems such that no one person could cause a catastrophe. And if we fail, it's not that any individual fail, but that we failed as a team. Because when we succeed as a team. And so I've always taken that to heart, that, you know, the custodians who clean our offices, the staff assistants who help us organize events and who keep our calendars in place and help with administration, we're all a team. So I think it's important to recognize the team is more than the people that you exchange, you know, technical information with.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. We'll move on to our next question. How can allies and leaders create spaces for people to successfully be themselves in the workplace or environment? Carlos?
Yeah, I'll add a couple here, and I think you know, some of the panelists may be able to add some. And Randy already pointed out too, some scholarship opportunities. One big one, and this could be anybody. You don't have to be in a supervisor or leadership role to help others succeed, right? So I would love for the path to test pilot to be easier for the next Mexican immigrant, right? That's my goal, is that path is a lot easier, right? So that they can climb to higher mountains, right? So I don't mind struggling, may not make it to the peak, but they can, right? And so, you know, how is it that we do that? One thing that we did at CU Boulder is we created a program called STEM Routes, right? And the main focus of STEM Routes was to address a lot of the issues that many minorities face or underserved populations face from going to undergrad to grad school, right? And so even as the population of Latinos grows in the United States, the population represented in advanced degrees is really low, right? And a lot of it has to do with, you know, how do I take the GREs, grants? Do I get a master's or a PhD? Is that required in aerospace engineering? Not required. How do I find an advisor? How do I navigate this academic space? And so, so we, a group of minority students, grad students at the time, created a program, and it included mentorship. It included workshops on applications, right? We'd help you with your grad school applications. We'd help you with your grant applications. You'd get summer research opportunities to help to build out your CV, right? And that was just students helping students, right? These are people who we were only, for many of us, only 1 or 2 years removed from that undergraduate experience, helping those behind us, right? So you don't need to be at a high level to do so. And then I would say for any of those who are in industry, research has proven time and time again that diverse teams far excel non-diverse ones, right? And so I would encourage leaders, supervisors to be curious, right? If you find out that one of your members, right, is from the Caribbean, right, you know, and likes plantain, like whatever, like the food, like ask them about who they are. Ask your people about where they come from. Everybody thinks a little bit differently. Bring those diverse voices into the room and amplify them, right? Like I find that one of the roles as a mentor or a leader is you're the amplifier of the voices of your team and support them in a way. Like if they're playing, like for me, if you walk into my office, there's 2 paintings of Aztec warriors. There's going to be probably Maná, right? I'm a big fan of 90s Spanish rock. That's going to be blaring, right? Like you're going to walk into a very Mexican space, But by doing so, I also allow those others around me to be and use their own voice, right? And then a very simple one here is the last one is like, it took me a while to stop mispronouncing my name. And that might seem like a little thing, right? It's very easy for me to introduce myself as Carlos, but my parents didn't call me Carlos; they call me Carlos. And now that sounds subtly different, but it is significantly different, right? I am Spanish. I say my name in Spanish. I don't walk around saying other people's names in a different language, right? And so when I meet those from other cultures, I try as much as possible to honor where they come from, even in small ways like, hey, how can I pronounce your name the way it's meant to be pronounced, right? And so they can, they hear themselves and they hear their voice heard.
Awesome, thank you. That one's interesting because I guess that is right. Carlos, very different. Catalina, Catalina, it sounds very different in a way. So
Yeah,
thank you
I
for
don't
sharing
like my friends who name like Thomas. I don't walk up to be like, hey, Tomas, how you doing?
that.
Right. So
Yeah, of course. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Is there any other panelists want to add on how allies and leaders can create safe spaces?
So
Or
I just want to amplify what Carlos said, in that I think leaders have responsibility to be role models. When you're leading a meeting, make sure that everyone has participated. And I know that if someone is asked, "Oh, so what do you think, Ricardo? What did you have any thoughts about this?" That could make the person very uncomfortable. But at the same time, the leader needs to be able to hear these voices and draw them out. And so there's a balance to be made. But I think it's really important that folks who are leaders, whether it's leading a meeting or leading organization, um, become role models, because the people who are sort of the followers, the members, they're going to mimic behavior. And so we all want to put forth our best behavior so that others will sort of view that as a role model and as a positive role model. So just amplifying what Carlos had to say.
Mhm. Catalina, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Randy and Carlos really hit it, really did a good job of putting exactly what you should do. Always make sure that you are, you know, presenting yourself the way that you want people to, um, treat you, or treat yourself, or treat people the way that you want to be treated, because um, that is something that, you know, make people around you feel comfortable. Make sure that, you're giving everyone a fair opportunity to all be um, in the school place or workplace, to feel comfortable, because you do spend a lot of time in those places. So it's really important.
The next question might be similar, but is there a way that the company itself can maybe foster this welcoming environment? And anyone can answer this.
Yeah, I can go ahead and give an answer to this one. So there's so many different ways that companies can get involved in making sure that everyone is, represented. And at Lockheed Martin specifically, we have different organizations that represent different communities. So our Hispanic community is actually represented by our OLA organization, where they put together different events for people within the same community, and it spreads across the country. We have three. For aeronautics specifically, we have people in Palmdale doing different events. We have people in Marietta doing events, and we all could collaborate together and um, work on, finding similarities, and, finding people that may be from the same country. I know I've had some folks reach out to me and say like, "Oh, you're from Chile," and I'm like, "Yeah, my parents are from Chile." Then you're able to, foster relationships that way as well.
That's great. Thank you.
The laboratory also has what we call employee resource groups for a number of number of communities at the laboratory, and I think they're a great way. But I think that it would be good that and because JPL is a nonprofit and it's a government supported, it's a little different than Lockheed in that and how they can financially support those organizations. But representation is important nonetheless.
Thank you for that. I think I have one more question, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. How do you think we can encourage other Latinos and Latinas to pursue aerospace careers?
Just show them an airplane. They see a spaceship. I think the last mission that we just had from SpaceX coming back caught the booster on a tower. Like it's crazy what people are doing these days in aerospace engineering, and a lot of those teams are Latinos in all those teams, right? We have Latinos building the spacecraft, right? I think as Randy pointed out, these are full team enterprises in aerospace, and so I think panels like this, you have people in government, industry, military to go, hey, Latinos are in all these spaces, like I don't foresee a major aerospace achievement occurring without a Latino helping out in some way. And so it's inevitable. We're everywhere, right? And we like cool stuff. We like working on cool stuff. And so to me, take them air show, take them to an air show. Go to JPL. JPL has family days. It's one of my favorite that they do a couple times a year. If you happen to be in the West Coast, go look at some Mars robots. And so you get a little bit of exposure into this field and this work, and I think a lot of people will be very interested.
Yeah, I have to agree. Exposure is key. Carlos was talking about spacecraft. Well, yesterday JPL launched a spacecraft to the Jovian environment. Take 6 years to get there, but there were a lot of Latinos, a lot of women, a lot of underrepresented groups that were part of that team, that are part of that team. So watching that launch was just a glorious thing and made my heart sing. So yeah, come to JPL and visit us and check us out. Exposure is key.
Yeah, I'll echo the same thing that these two great fellows did. They Lockheed, there's always something happening around. And one of the biggest things for me that I will say is give back to your communities. If you are in a position where you've had the opportunity to, learn a lot about the industry, being a graduate in college, and you can find yourself mentees or find yourself in mentorships for kids or students that just don't have that exposure, put yourself in those positions because you are the one inspiring them at that point. You are the one that is giving them that entryway into an industry that has so much to offer. So.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, like aerospace is trying to solve some pretty hard problems, right? And I would say that we need your voice, right? We need those in attendance today who are interested or are already part of the industry to solve these problems, right? Whether it's global warming, farm crops, epidemic, like satellites are taking that imagery, right? Opportunity to give people education through virtual education that's happening through satellite Wi-Fi to remote areas where they didn't have access before, right? So aerospace is bringing education to places that didn't have it before, ensuring that we have as much of an understanding as a scientific community on what the impact we're having on our own planet, right? So there's a lot of different opportunities and unique problems to solve that impact even small communities through the aerospace.
Awesome. Well, those are all the general questions that I had for y'all. Thank y'all for sharing those perspectives. We'll now do the Q&A portion of this. So we do have some questions. Carlos, you got one specifically from this guy named Alex. He's an aerospace engineer and a F-35, F-22 lead flight safety engineer. He basically wants to come see that B-21
Yeah, the UFO. Yeah, you gotta get right in. It's a special access program, right? So you the first 6th-gen aircraft that the Air Force has built. So still highly classified. Still looks like a UFO. So
I would
get on the. Mhm,
I would have wanted to join in with him.
mhm.
But I also got this other question for y'all. This is one for everyone. Someone said, Randy, you talked about taking the opportunities that come along the way. Catalina about believing in one's inner potential. Carlos about having a model to follow who lives the dream that we have. So this question's for all of y'all. For those of us who have a dream that seems difficult to achieve, how do you seize and create the opportunities presented along the way? How did you do it? And what advice would you give para aquellos que nos atrevemos a soñar? Randy, Catalina, Carlos. I know this is pretty
Well,
much
so
for everyone.
so I think one is do the best you can academically. Ask questions, seek out people. So this is something that actually someone told me a long time ago. When you're in a meeting or you're in a space and someone's talking, giving a talk or lecturing or whatever, and they seem like, oh, I want to know more about what they do. Well, afterwards, seek them out and say, hey, I have some questions. And sort of see if maybe that's a mentor situation. I mean, I'd be honored if someone came up to me and said, wow, Randy, I'd really like it if we could, maybe have a mentor and the mentee relationship. I think I could learn a lot. Like, wow. I mean, and J killers in general love to talk about what they do. You can't shut them up. So you take advantage of people's desire to sort of reach out and exchange ideas and help people grow.
I will second that as well. I think that one of the best ways that you can go and see some opportunities is find yourself a mentor within the industry or someone that, has like the attributes and qualities that you want to, you are inspired to be. Um, People all in the industry, more likely than not, will always be willing to answer any questions, will always be interested in sharing their experiences. So find yourself a mentor or, attend, different fairs that many companies host. I know that, there's career fairs all over the place, not just to get a career, but also to just learn about the companies that are out there. Um, I know that for myself, I did not know about all the aerospace industries until I went to a Society of Women Engineer national conference, and I saw them all in one big ballroom, and I was like, oh my goodness, how I didn't even know that there could be this many. But even there, just, be curious and ask questions and make sure that you are, seeking out people that can give you more opportunities.
Yeah, and I'll just add, the human brain is designed to learn, right? That's what it wants to do. So you don't have to do much more than just let it do its thing, right? So like I said, I think I echo here, being curious is a big part of it. Seeking opportunities can be a real challenge, right? Because it always feels like you have to bust down doors all the time. And I can attest to the fact that by the time you get to your third door, estás cansado, right? Like you're tired. Like, why am I having to work so hard for the same things that other people find so easy to achieve, right? And that's where I think when people talk about finding mentors, finding those people, organizations, SHIP is a good one, right? What a lot of these places do is that they just crack that door a little bit open, right? So you don't have to bust that down. You can just walk in and walk into the room. And so, and don't be afraid to take on those opportunities. And you'd be surprised, like Randy said, about the number of opportunities that arise from just going to talk to people about what they do. And you may realize, like, oh, you did this program. I didn't know about GEM. Like, oh, that's a cool thing. Let me go apply to that. I didn't know about, Z Factor Fellow, which now leads to a summer internship and a mentor, right? And to me, very interesting to see the snowball effect And I've always appreciated from our culture being so family oriented that extends, right? We all have parientes that we call tios, or they're not my real uncle. We just call them tio because they're so close. And so I find that to be the case as well in industry, that reach out to, if you're on LinkedIn, on any of these applications that'll allow you to connect with others. That connection and that strength and that cultural bond is actually really important and strong to me within the Latinos. And so tons of opportunities open up in that way. And then I'll just one of my favorite quotes, I brought my phone out. Apologies for Googling in the middle of the webinar, but Harriet Tubman is one of my favorite quotes when talking about dreamers. So she said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." So
I love that.
So here's a little piece of advice when folks go to career fairs like a SHIP or etc. And you're going to go talk to people who are working at booths from places like JPL or the Air Force or Lockheed Martin. Think about what you want that person to remember about you when that conversation ends. Your conversation is only going to be 10 minutes long. So think about what you want them to remember about you. And sort of, so what's that thing? And I think that will help you a lot to sort of like narrow in what it is you want to say to these folks.
Awesome. Thank you. I think just with time, okay, well, maybe we have time for this quick question. Do you have a favorite sci-fi movie or book?
Oh, Wrinkle in Time.
Yeah, I know. Gattaca, for anybody who's seen it, right? That's a person who's trying to become an astronaut, but in that book, you can't, based on genes and DNA, right? So, and it's all about how do you overcome an organization or bureaucracy or government agency to achieve your dreams when literally every obstacle says that you can't do it. So I love that movie.
I'll give a movie. It's very basic, but I enjoy it, and I've watched it multiple times on different flights across the country. Top Gun. The new Top Gun Maverick. I watched that movie, and it really it pumped me up at my job right now. So I really enjoy watching it because I'm just like, that's why I do what I do.
That's awesome. I actually was listening to Danger Zone the other day while I was trying to mentally prepare for something. So that's awesome. But that's all the time we have for questions. Thank y'all for talking and sharing your experiences. Yeah, so please thank the panelists for being here today, for having this great discussion.
Hey, and thank you to the AIAA for hosting this. I was meaning to start off that way, but thank you to the AIAA for hosting this.
Yeah. Just a couple announcements. If you plan to attend the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers Conference in Anaheim later this month, please visit the AIAA booth. If you would like to be featured in our AIAA Diversity Spotlights, please complete the form linked in the chat. I think there is a link in the chat. You will be receiving a survey about today's discussion. Please complete it and let us know what else you would like similar topics on. Thank you again for joining us. And that's pretty much all I have, unless any of y'all have anything else to say. But you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you,
Yeah, I will say for
Ricardo.
anybody,
Yeah,
and anybody in the audience, feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions that we didn't address, or you're interested in any of our opportunities, either through AIAA or on LinkedIn. Please reach out and ask questions.
Absolutely.
Y échale ganas.
Échale ganas.
Awesome.